The sky above New Avalon was burning. Great sheets of orange and white fire rolled across the clouds as the Dominion warships fired their orbital cannons again and again, turning everything below into ash. Buildings that had taken decades to build collapsed in seconds. Forests that had grown for centuries became black smoke. The ground itself cracked open and glowed red like a wound that would never heal. Cole Dayton stood on the bridge of the Iron Veil and watched it happen. He did not speak. He did not move. He just stood there with his hands at his sides and his jaw tight, watching the world die through the forward viewport. Every flash of light from below was a neighborhood, a school, a hospital. Every tremor that reached them through the atmosphere was 1,000 lives ending at once. "Captain," said Nate Greer from behind him. Nate was his first officer, a tall man with tired eyes and steady hands. He had served with Cole for 9 years, and had learned long ago that there were moments when words did nothing. But this was not one of those moments. "Captain, we need to go, now." Cole did not turn around. "How many did we get?" 412 civilians, 61 crew. That is everyone we can carry." "That is not enough." "No," Nate agreed quietly. "It is not. But if we stay, we lose them too." Cole closed his eyes. When he opened them again, something had changed in his face. It was not sadness. It was not anger. It was something deeper and colder. Something that settled into the bones and stayed there. He turned from the viewport and walked to his command chair. "Get us out of here," he said. "Full speed. Take us into the dark." The Iron Veil was not a pretty ship. She was a mid-class frigate, built for patrol work and light combat, not for running from the largest armada the galaxy had ever assembled. Her hull was scarred from a dozen battles. Her port engine had been rebuilt 3 times. Her weapons were outdated by at least a generation. But she was fast when she needed to be, and her crew knew how to squeeze every last bit of power from her systems. Lisa Marsh, the chief engineer, was already down in the engine room doing exactly that. Lisa was a short woman with grease-stained hands and a voice that could cut through a reactor alarm. She had joined the fleet 20 years ago as a mechanic's apprentice, and now there was no machine in the known galaxy that she could not fix, rebuild, or turn into something dangerous. "I am giving you everything I have," she said over the comm, her voice tight with effort. "But if they hit us once in the rear quarter, we are done. The shielding back there is held together with hope and welding wire." "Understood," Cole said. "Nate, plot a course for the Ashenmere Nebula. Use the debris field from the orbital stations as cover on the way out." Nate's fingers moved across the navigation console. Around them, the last remnants of the human fleet were scattering like sparks from a dying fire. Some ships jumped to faster-than-light speed and vanished. Others were not so lucky. Cole watched a transport carrying families blink out of existence as a Dominion beam cut it in half. He watched a pair of fighters fly directly into an enemy cruiser's engine port in a suicide run that bought 3 civilian shuttles enough time to escape. He watched, and he remembered every single one. The Iron Veil slipped through the debris field, dodging chunks of metal and stone that had once been humanity's proudest orbital stations. Nate guided them with calm precision, calling out course adjustments in a flat, steady voice, while explosions lit up the space around them. Lisa kept the engines running hot, rerouting power from every non-essential system to the drives. They made it out, barely. Behind them, New Avalon continued to burn. For 3 hours, no one on the bridge spoke. The only sounds were the hum of the engines and the occasional beep of a console. The civilians in the cargo bays were silent too, huddled together in the dim emergency lighting, holding their children and staring at nothing. Then the broadcast came. It arrived on every frequency, in every language, transmitted from the Dominion's flagship to every corner of the galaxy. The face that appeared on the screen was Archon Zeleth, the supreme commander of the Veyrath Dominion. He was tall even by alien standards, with pale gray skin, and 4 eyes that glowed a soft and terrible gold. His voice was deep and smooth, and he spoke with the absolute confidence of someone who believed he had already won. "The war is over," Zelith said. "The human infestation has been cleansed from the galaxy. Their worlds are ash, their fleets are scattered, their species is broken beyond recovery. Let this be a lesson to all who would challenge the Dominion. There is no force in this universe that can stand against our united will. The one they called the Reaper is dead or running, and either way, he is nothing. Humanity is nothing. The galaxy belongs to us." The broadcast ended. Silence filled the bridge again. Nate looked at Cole. Lisa's voice came through the comm, quiet and waiting. Somewhere in the cargo bay, a child was crying. Cole reached over and turned off the display. He sat in his chair for a long moment, his eyes fixed on the stars ahead. The nebula was out there, dark and swirling and full of radiation that would kill most species in hours. But not humans. Humans were stubborn like that. They lived in places that should have killed them. They survived things that should have ended them. They got back up when every logical calculation said they should stay down. Cole Dayton was very, very human. He stood up from his chair. Every eye on the bridge turned to him. He did not raise his voice. He did not make a fist, or slam a console, or deliver a dramatic speech. He simply looked at his crew, the people who had followed him through hell and were still standing, and he said one sentence. They just made the worst mistake of their lives. And somewhere deep in the cold of space, aboard a battered frigate carrying the last flicker of a dying species, something began. It was not hope, not exactly. It was quieter than that, and far more dangerous. It was the slow, patient fury of a man who had lost everything, and decided that the universe was going to pay for it. The Reaper was not dead. He was not running. He was thinking. And that was the thing the Dominion should have feared most of all. The Ashenmere Nebula was a graveyard of light. Thick clouds of irradiated gas stretched across billions of kilometers, glowing a faint and sickly green where dying stars had once poured their last energy into the void. No trade route passed through it. No colony had ever been built inside it. The radiation alone was enough to fry the nervous systems of most known species within days, and the magnetic storms could rip a ship's navigation apart in seconds. Humans, however, were not most known species. Cole brought the iron veil into the nebula slowly, carefully, letting Lisa Marsh adjust the shielding as they went deeper. The radiation was harsh, but manageable for humans, whose biology had evolved on a world that regularly bathed them in ultraviolet light and cosmic rays. What would kill a Salvarian hours would give a human a headache and a bad sunburn. It was one of the many small, strange advantages that came from being born on a planet that seemed to actively enjoy trying to murder its inhabitants. They had been inside the nebula for 2 days when Nate picked up the first signal. It was faint, buried in static, but it was unmistakably human. "It is a distress beacon," Nate said, leaning forward in his chair. "Military frequency. Old encryption, but valid." Cole looked at the coordinates, deep in the nebula, near a cluster of dead asteroids. "Take us there." What they found changed everything. It was not one ship, it was dozens. Frigates, transports, cargo haulers, medical ships, even a pair of damaged destroyers drifting side by side with their hulls welded together for structural support. They were battered, broken, patched with whatever materials their crews had been able to find. But they were there, and they were alive. The humans had gathered in the dark like wounded animals, finding each other through whispered transmissions and shared desperation. There were soldiers and civilians, engineers and doctors, teachers and children. Nearly 3,000 people in total, all hiding in a place the Dominion would never think to look, because no sane species would go there willingly. Cole docked the Iron Veil with the largest of the destroyers and stepped aboard. The corridors were cold and dimly lit. People sat along the walls wrapped in thermal blankets, their faces hollow and tired. Children slept in makeshift beds made from cargo containers. A medic was treating burns with supplies that had clearly run out days ago, using strips of cloth and antiseptic made from engine coolant. He walked through every corridor. He visited every ship. He learned names. He listened to stories. A woman named Meg had lost her entire family on New Avalon, but had managed to pilot a shuttle full of strangers to safety. A retired engineer named Sam Cooley had kept 3 ships running, with nothing but spare parts and stubbornness. A group of teenage cadets had fought off a Dominion boarding party with hand tools and courage that should have been impossible for people their age. Cole asked each of them the same question. He asked it quietly, without pressure, without expectation. He simply looked them in the eye and said, "Are you done? Or do you have one more fight in you?" Every single one said yes. It was on the 3rd day that he met Danny Hartwell. She was young, maybe 25, with short dark hair and the kind of sharp, restless eyes that never stopped analyzing. She had been an intelligence officer stationed at a listening post on the edge of human space, and when the Dominion attacked, she had done something remarkable. Instead of running immediately, she had spent 11 minutes downloading every piece of encrypted Dominion communication her systems could reach before the station was destroyed around her. 11 minutes that nearly killed her. 11 minutes that might save humanity. "I have everything," she told Cole, in a cramped briefing room aboard one of the destroyers. She spread data across the table, projected from a cracked portable display. Fleet movements, supply routes, command codes, internal communications between the coalition species. All of it. "What does it tell us?" Cole asked. Danny looked at him with something that was almost a smile. "It tells us they are afraid of each other, almost as much as they were afraid of us. The Dominion is not a family. It is an arrangement. 12 species held together by one thing, the Archon's flagship, the Throne of Silence. Every order, every strategy, every resource allocation flows through that ship. Zeleth controls everything personally because he does not trust anyone else to do it." Nate, standing in the corner with his arms crossed, saw it immediately. Single point of failure. "Exactly," Danny said. "Kill the flagship, and the entire Dominion loses its brain. The coalition species will not know what to do. They will argue, they will blame each other, and they will fall apart." Cole stared at the data for a long time. Then he looked up. "How long do we need to get ready?" "Weeks," said Lisa Marsh, who had joined them with grease on her face and a wrench still in her hand. "Months if you want to do it right. Half these ships cannot even fly straight, let alone fight." "Then we do it right," Cole said. And so they began. The nebula became a shipyard, a training ground, and a home. Lisa organized repair crews that worked around the clock, stripping wrecked ships for parts and rebuilding what they could. Sam Cooley, the retired engineer, turned out to be a quiet genius. He studied the nebula's radiation patterns and found a way to use them, bending the energy fields around the fleet to create a natural cloaking effect that would make them invisible to Dominion sensors. Nate Greer spent his days planning. He built models of Dominion fleet formations, studied their tactics, found their patterns. The Dominion was powerful but predictable. They relied on overwhelming force and rigid hierarchy. They did not adapt well to surprise because they had never needed to. No one had ever been crazy enough to surprise them. Danny fed false signals into the Dominion's communication networks, making it appear as though scattered human survivors were fleeing in every direction except toward the nebula. She planted ghost signals, phantom ships, and fake distress calls that sent Dominion patrols chasing shadows across empty space. Meanwhile, the Dominion celebrated. They divided Earth's former colonies among the 12 species. They held ceremonies and parades. They erected monuments to their victory. They did not search the Ashenmere Nebula, because their scientists had assured them that nothing could survive inside it for long. They were wrong. Deep in the glowing dark, humanity was putting itself back together. Ship by ship, person by person, wound by wound. They were not the powerful fleet they had once been. They were smaller, weaker, held together by patches and willpower. But they had something the Dominion did not have and could not understand. They had Cole Dayton, and Cole Dayton had a plan. The Reaper sat alone on the bridge of the Iron Veil at night when the crew was sleeping, staring at star charts and tracing routes with his finger. He did not sleep much anymore. He did not need to. Something was keeping him awake, something that burned low and steady in his chest, like a coal that refused to go out. It was not revenge, though revenge was part of it. It was something older and simpler. It was the basic human refusal to accept that the story was over. The belief, irrational and unshakable, that as long as one person was still standing, the fight was not done. The galaxy had written humanity's ending. Cole Dayton was about to rewrite it. The first attack came without warning, without sound, and without mercy. A Dominion cargo convoy was moving through the Tessara corridor, 6 heavy transports carrying fuel and weapons to a newly established military outpost. The route was considered safe. The war was over after all. There was nothing left to fear. The convoy had a light escort of 2 patrol frigates, more out of habit than necessity. The crews were relaxed. Some were sleeping. One of the transport captains was watching an entertainment broadcast from the Selvari homeworld. They never saw the Iron Veil. Cole's ship came out of the dark like a knife. No engine flare, no sensor warning, nothing. Sam Cooley's radiation cloak worked exactly as designed, bending the nebula's residual energy around the hull and making the frigate invisible to everything except the naked eye. By the time the Dominion sensors picked up the anomaly, it was already too late. The 2 escort frigates were disabled in under 90 seconds. Precise strikes to their engine cores and weapons arrays, nothing lethal, just enough to leave them drifting and blind. Then, the Iron Veil turned on the transports. One by one, Cole's crew boarded them, stripped them of fuel and supplies, wiped their navigation computers, and left. The entire operation took less than 20 minutes. When the escort frigates finally restored communications and called for help, the only thing they could report was a ghost. A ship that appeared from nowhere, struck without hesitation, and vanished without a trace. And on the wall of the lead transport's cargo bay, someone had carved a single word into the metal with a plasma cutter: Reaper. The Dominion ignored it. A single raid by desperate survivors was not worth their attention. The official report called it an isolated incident, likely committed by pirates using stolen human technology. The matter was filed and forgotten. Then it happened again. A relay station on the border of Korat space went dark. When a repair crew arrived, they found every system gutted, every data core removed, and every piece of communications equipment taken apart with surgical precision. The station's crew was alive, locked in a storage compartment with enough food and water for 3 days. None of them had seen or heard anything. They had simply woken up in the dark with no idea how they got there. 2 days later, a fuel depot in the Drenmar sector exploded. The blast was so perfectly placed that it destroyed the depot's reserves without damaging the surrounding civilian structures. It was the work of someone who knew exactly what they were doing and wanted the Dominion to know it. Then the transmissions began. They came on every frequency, slipping through Dominion encryption like water through cracks. A calm, quiet human voice, speaking 7 words that spread across the galaxy like a cold wind. We are still here. Remember that. Danny Hardwell was the architect of the information war. From her station aboard one of the repaired destroyers deep inside the nebula, she managed a web of false signals, intercepted communications, and planted intelligence that made the Dominion see threats everywhere. She created phantom fleet signatures in 6 different sectors. She spoofed distress calls that sent patrol ships racing to empty coordinates. She intercepted private communications between coalition species and leaked them to rival factions, turning small disagreements into open arguments. The Korath, proud warriors who considered themselves the backbone of the Dominion's military, were the first to crack. Their fleet commander sent a furious message to Archon Zelith, demanding that a full battle group be assigned to hunt the human survivors. Zelith refused, calling it a waste of resources. The Korath commander responded with words that in Korath culture were one step short of a declaration of war. The Selvari, who had always been uncomfortable with the genocide of an entire species, began quietly pulling their diplomatic staff from joint operations. The Drenmar accused the Korath of failing to secure their own territory. The smaller species watched nervously as the cracks in the coalition grew wider. And through it all, Cole kept striking. He never hit the same sector twice. He never used the same approach. Sometimes the attacks were bold, a direct assault on a military target that left burning wreckage and terrified crews. Sometimes they were subtle, a supply shipment that arrived at its destination with every weapon replaced by rocks. A governor's private shuttle that suddenly started broadcasting human music on all channels. A Dominion admiral who woke up to find a human combat knife embedded in his desk with a note that read, "Next time, it will not be the desk." The fear spread faster than the damage. The Dominion soldiers began to see threats in every shadow. Patrols doubled, then tripled. Ships that had been assigned to occupation duty were pulled back to guard core worlds. The Dominion was spending more resources hunting ghosts than it had spent fighting the actual war. It was during the 5th week of the campaign that Cole launched his most daring operation yet. Danny had intercepted intelligence about a Dominion prison transport moving through the Vela system. The ship was carrying over 1,000 human captives, soldiers and civilians, taken during the fall of the colonies. They were being transported to labor camps deep in Dominion space, where they would spend the rest of their lives mining ore for their conquerors. Cole gathered his strike team personally. Nate planned the approach. Lisa rigged the boarding craft. And at 3 in the morning by ship time, the Iron Veil and 2 escort ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel directly in the path of the prison transport. The battle was short and vicious. The transport's escort tried to fight back, but was overwhelmed by the speed and fury of the human attack. Cole led the boarding party himself, cutting through the transport's security doors with breaching charges, and moving through the corridors with the cold efficiency that had earned him his name. They found the prisoners in the lower decks, crammed into cells barely large enough to stand in. Men, women, and children, thin and bruised and hollow-eyed, staring at the human soldiers who had come for them as though they were looking at ghosts. Among the freed prisoners was a woman named Katie Voss. She was a Marine sergeant, or she had been before the fall. She was covered in bruises and had a broken rib that she had clearly set herself. When Cole opened her cell, she looked at him with eyes that were hard and bright and completely unbroken. "Took you long enough," she said. "Sorry about that," Cole replied. "You want to help us make them pay?" Katie Voss smiled. It was not a kind smile. "Where do I sign up?" They brought the freed prisoners back to the nebula. Medical teams treated the wounded. Families were reunited. Soldiers, who had thought they would die in chains, found themselves holding weapons again, standing on the decks of human ships, breathing free air. And across the galaxy, the Dominion was finally beginning to understand what it was dealing with. This was not a scattered group of desperate survivors. This was a campaign, planned, coordinated, and executed with a precision that should have been impossible for a defeated species. Archon Zelith sat in his throne room, aboard the Throne of Silence, and read the reports one by one. Vanished convoys, destroyed depots, freed prisoners, coalition allies turning against each other. And underneath all of it, like a drumbeat growing louder, one name: the Reaper. Zelith had told the galaxy the Reaper was dead. He had told them humanity was finished. He had told them the war was won. He was beginning to realize he had been wrong about all of it. Archon Zelith was not a fool. He had united 12 species under one banner, conquered half the galaxy, and crushed the most stubborn enemy the Dominion had ever faced. He had made mistakes, yes. He had underestimated the humans. He had celebrated too soon. But he would not make those mistakes again. He sat in the war room of the Throne of Silence, surrounded by holographic maps and fleet commanders from 6 coalition species. And he laid out his plan with the patience and precision of someone who had been planning wars for longer than most humans had been alive. "The Caldera system," he said, pointing to a cluster of stars on the edge of Dominion space. "We will build a weapons research station there. Not a real one, a shell. We will fill it with false data, outdated prototypes, and enough sensor signatures to make it look like the most valuable target in the sector. Then, we will hide 3 full battle fleets in the asteroid fields around the system and wait." The Korath commander leaned forward, his massive jaw tightening with interest. "You believe the Reaper will come for it?" "I know he will," Zelith said. "The humans are desperate for technology. They are fighting with scraps and stolen parts. A weapons research station would be irresistible to them. They will come, and when they do, we will close the trap and end this once and for all." The plan was sound. The bait was convincing. The trap was well hidden. Every detail had been considered, every angle covered. Zelith had committed the bulk of the Dominion's combined military to this single operation, pulling ships from patrol routes, border stations, and occupation forces across the galaxy. It was a risk, but it was a calculated one. And the Reaper, and the human resistance would die with him. What Zelith did not know was that Danny Hartwell had been reading his mail for weeks. She brought the intelligence to Cole in the small hours of the morning, her face lit by the pale glow of her datapad. "It is a trap," she said simply. "The Caldera system, the research station is fake. They have 3 battle fleets hidden in the asteroids waiting for us." Cole studied the data in silence. Nate Greer stood beside him, reading over his shoulder, his expression shifting from concern to calculation to something that might have been the beginning of a smile. "He is pulling ships from everywhere," Nate said quietly. "Core world defenses, patrol routes, occupation forces. If his entire fleet is at Caldera, then everywhere else is exposed," Cole finished. He looked at Danny. "Can you confirm the fleet positions?" "Already done. I have tracked every major Dominion vessel in the galaxy. When they move to Caldera, their core worlds will have skeleton defenses. Some will have almost nothing at all." Cole stood up and walked to the star chart mounted on the wall. He stared at it for a long time, his fingers tracing lines between systems, calculating distances, timing, angles of approach. The others watched him and waited. They had learned that when Cole went quiet, something dangerous was forming behind his eyes. "We are going to walk into the trap," he said. Nate blinked. "Excuse me?" "We are going to take the Iron Veil and a small strike force into the Caldera system. We are going to engage their vanguard. We are going to make it look desperate and reckless and exactly like what they expect from a cornered enemy making one last stupid move." "And while they are busy destroying us?" Lisa Marsh asked from the doorway, where she had been listening with her arms folded. "While they are busy with us, the rest of the fleet, every ship, every fighter, every armed shuttle we have, hits their undefended core worlds. Simultaneously, all at once." The room was silent for 5 full seconds. "That is insane," Katie Voss said from the corner where she had been cleaning her rifle. She said it with a grin. That is the point, Cole replied. They will not see it coming because no sane person would do it. We are going to use their own trap against them. They want to concentrate their forces in one place. Fine. We will let them. And then we will take everything they left behind. The preparation took 3 weeks. 3 weeks of planning, drilling, repairing, and rehearsing every detail, until every person in the fleet knew their role by heart. Lisa Marsh worked miracles in the engine rooms, rigging a network of faster-than-light communication buoys that would allow the entire fleet to coordinate in real time across multiple star systems. Sam Cooley planted explosive charges on 3 Dominion shipyards using stealth shuttles and more courage than any retired engineer should have been asked to provide. Nate Greer designed the battle plan for the Caldera diversion. It was a masterpiece of controlled chaos. The small strike force would jump in, hit hard enough to look like a real attack, then execute a fighting retreat that would draw the Dominion fleet deeper and deeper into pursuit. Every move was calculated to keep the enemy chasing, keep them committed, keep them looking in the wrong direction for as long as possible. Dani prepared the final piece. She loaded the Dominion's communication channels with false intelligence, suggesting that the entire human fleet was converging on Caldera. She made it look like this was humanity's last stand. She made it so convincing that even Zealoth's own intelligence officers confirmed it. The day came. Cole stood on the bridge of the Iron Veil with his strike force arrayed behind him. 12 ships. 12 battered, patched, rebuilt ships crewed by people who had lost everything and volunteered to fly into the teeth of 3 battle fleets. Everyone knows the plan, Cole said over the fleet channel. Stay fast, stay sharp, and stay alive. We do not need to win this fight. We just need to keep their eyes on us long enough for the real attack to land. Nate has command of the diversion once we engage. Follow his lead. Trust each other. He paused. And if they kill me, do not stop. Do not slow down. Finish it. The Iron Veil jumped. The Caldera system erupted into chaos the moment they arrived. Cole's strike force hit the Dominion vanguard with everything they had, punching through the outer screening ships and driving straight for the Fink research station. The Dominion commanders reacted exactly as Zealoth had planned, closing the trap from 3 sides, bringing hundreds of warships to bear on the tiny human force. And at that exact moment, across the galaxy, the rest of the human fleet emerged from the nebula. They hit the Dominion's core worlds like a hammer. Shipyards exploded as Sam Cooley's planted charges detonated in perfect sequence. Orbital defense platforms were overwhelmed by swarms of fighters that appeared from nowhere. Supply depots, communication hubs, and command stations were struck so fast that the skeleton crews defending them barely had time to send distress calls. Dani jammed every Dominion frequency she could reach, flooding their networks with noise and confusion. Coalition species received contradictory orders from sources that all appeared legitimate. The Selvari fleet, already on the edge of withdrawal, received a transmission that appeared to come from Zealoth himself, ordering them to stand down. They did. The Drenmar received intelligence, planted by Dani, suggesting the Korath were planning to seize their territory in the confusion. The Drenmar turned their ships to face the Korath border. The coalition was tearing itself apart from the inside. At Caldera, Nate Greer executed the fighting retreat with surgical precision. Every time the Dominion thought they had the human ships pinned, the formation shifted, slipped through a gap, and struck from a new angle. The Dominion fleet, built for overwhelming force and rigid formations, could not adapt fast enough. They kept chasing, kept committing more ships, kept looking at the small bright fire in front of them, while their empire burned behind them. Katie Voss led a Marine boarding team onto a Korath command ship that had pushed too far ahead of its formation. 32 Marines against a crew of 800. They took the ship in 40 minutes. Katie personally captured the Korath battle commander and sent his surrender on an open channel. The effect on Korath morale was devastating. By the time Zelith realized what was happening, it was too late. His fleets were out of position. His allies were fighting each other. His supply lines were burning. His communications were compromised. He stood in his war room, aboard the Throne of Silence, and watched his empire come apart in real time. The Reaper had not walked into a trap. He had turned the entire galaxy into one, and Zelith was the one caught inside it. The Throne of Silence was the largest warship ever built by any species in the known galaxy. It stretched across 3 kilometers of space, bristling with weapon arrays that could crack a moon in half, and shielded by energy barriers that had never been breached. It was not just a ship. It was a symbol. It was the seat of Zealot's power, the nerve center of the entire Dominion, and the thing that held 12 fractured species together through fear and control. Cole Dayton looked at it through the forward viewport of the Iron Veil, and felt nothing but calm. The battle at Caldera had shifted. Nate's fighting retreat had done its work, drawing the Dominion fleet into a scattered pursuit across the system, while the real war was fought across the galaxy. Now, with the coalition crumbling and the core worlds burning, Zelith had recalled his flagship and its personal guard to make a final stand. The Throne of Silence hung in space, surrounded by a ring of elite warships, the last concentration of true Dominion power. Cole opened a channel, not to his own fleet, to everyone, every ship in the system, every relay station in range, every frequency the signal could reach. His voice carried across the void, quiet and steady, and absolutely certain. This is Cole Dayton of the human vessel Iron Veil. You burned our worlds. You killed our families. You told the galaxy we were finished. You held parades and divided our home among yourselves and erased our names from your records. And then you forgot about us. He paused. The silence across the channel was total. That was your mistake. Not the war, not the burning. Those things we could have forgiven in time. But you forgot us. You looked at everything humanity was, everything we built and fought for and loved, and you decided it was nothing. You decided we were nothing. His voice did not rise. It did not need to. Now I am going to show you what humanity looks like when it has nothing left to lose. The human fleet converged on the Throne of Silence from every direction. They came in broken ships, held together with welding and willpower. They came with weapons that were outdated, and shields that were patched, and engines that screamed with the effort of one more fight. They came because there was nowhere else to go and nothing else to do, except this one final impossible thing. The Dominion's elite guard opened fire. The space between the fleets became a wall of energy and light. Ships on both sides were hit, damaged, destroyed. A human destroyer took a direct hit to its command deck and kept firing with its secondary bridge. A fighter squadron flew into the teeth of a Dominion battery to clear a path for the larger ships behind them. Every human in the fleet fought with the fury of someone who had already accepted death and was simply choosing how to spend their last moments. Aboard the Iron Veil, Lisa Marsh was performing miracles. The ship had taken 6 direct hits in the first 3 minutes. The port shielding was gone. 2 weapon arrays were offline. The hull was breached in 3 places, sealed by emergency bulkheads that groaned under the pressure. Lisa rerouted power from systems that were already failing to systems that were failing slightly less, her hands moving across consoles with a speed and precision that defied logic. "I can give you engines or weapons," she told Cole over the comm. Her voice strained, but unbroken. "Pick one." "Engines," Cole said without hesitation. "Get us alongside the flagship." "You are out of your mind." "I know. Do it anyway." The Iron Veil surged forward, slipping through the chaos of the battle like a blade through smoke. Nate coordinated the fleet from a command deck that was literally falling apart around him, ceiling panels crashing down and consoles sparking, as he calmly issued orders that kept the formation together. Danny Hartwell sat at her station with blood running down her face from a cut above her eye, jamming Dominion communications with one hand and feeding tactical data to the fleet with the other. Cole suited up in combat armor and walked to the boarding shuttle. Katie Voss was already there with a squad of 30 Marines, the best fighters left in the human fleet. They were battered, exhausted, and armed with weapons that were held together with tape and determination. Every single one of them was smiling. "We are boarding the Throne of Silence," Cole told them. "We fight our way to the command center. We take the Archon. We end the war." Katie checked her rifle and looked at him. 32 of us against the most heavily guarded ship in the galaxy. 32 humans, Cole corrected. Katie nodded. Fair point. The Iron Veil brought them alongside the flagship's hull, close enough that the boarding shuttle crossed the gap in seconds. The Marines breached the outer hull with shaped charges and poured through the opening like water through a crack. The fighting inside was immediate and brutal. The Dominion's personal guard were the best soldiers the Coalition had, tall and armored and trained for exactly this kind of combat. But they had never fought humans in close quarters before. Not like this. Not humans who had lost everything, who had been told they were extinct, who had crawled out of the ashes and crossed the galaxy to stand in this exact corridor at this exact moment. The Marines fought with a savagery that was almost beautiful in its intensity. Katie Voss moved through the Dominion guards like a force of nature, breaking formations and creating openings that the rest of the squad exploited with ruthless efficiency. Cole fought beside them, not behind them. He was not a general standing on a hill watching the battle through a telescope. He was in the hallways, in the smoke, taking hits and giving them back. A plasma bolt caught him in the shoulder, and he kept moving. A guard twice his size tried to block his path, and he put the alien on the floor in 2 seconds and stepped over him without slowing down. Deck by deck, corridor by corridor, they pushed deeper into the flagship. The resistance grew fiercer as they approached the command center. But so did the Marines. They were beyond exhaustion, beyond pain, running on something that went deeper than adrenaline. It was the accumulated fury and grief and stubborn human refusal to quit that had brought them from the ashes of New Avalon to the heart of the enemy's power. Cole reached the throne room alone. Katie and the Marines held the corridor behind him, keeping the remaining guards at bay. He walked through the massive doors and into a chamber of cold metal and gold light, and there stood Archon Zelith. The alien was impressive even now. He towered over Cole, his 4 golden eyes burning with an intelligence and pride that had conquered half the galaxy. He wore ceremonial armor that gleamed like liquid metal, and in his hand he held a weapon that hummed with energy. "So," Zelith said, his deep voice filling the chamber, "the Reaper comes at last." Cole said nothing. He walked forward. "You have won nothing," Zelith continued. "You have broken my fleet, yes. You have turned my allies against each other. Impressive for an insect. But the Dominion will rebuild. We have rebuilt before. Your species is too small, too fragile, too short-lived to hold what you have taken. In 100 years, we will return, and there will be no one left who remembers your name." Cole stopped 10 paces from the Archon. He looked up at the towering alien, this being who had burned worlds and enslaved millions, and declared an entire species extinct, and he spoke quietly. "That is the thing about humans," he said. "You don't have to be the biggest or the strongest. You just have to be the one who does not stop." Zelith struck first. He was fast, faster than something that large should have been. His weapon carved a line of fire through the air where Cole's head had been a fraction of a second earlier. Cole moved under the strike, inside the Archon's reach, and the fight became close and desperate and final. It lasted less than a minute. Cole was smaller, slower, weaker in every measurable way. But he had something Zelith did not. He had already died on New Avalon. Everything after that was borrowed time, and he intended to spend every second of it. When it was over, Cole stood in the silence of the throne room and looked down at the body of the being who had tried to erase humanity from existence. He was bleeding, his armor was cracked, his hands were shaking, but he was standing. He reached for the ship's communication system and opened a channel to the galaxy. "The Archon is dead," he said. "The throne of silence is ours. The war is over." Across the galaxy, the Dominion collapsed. Without Zelith's centralized command, the coalition had no direction. Fleets went silent, armies stood down. The Selvari transmitted formal surrender within the hour. The Korath, stubborn to the last, fought on for 3 more days before their own soldiers refused to continue. The war that was supposed to have ended with humanity's extinction ended instead with humanity standing in the wreckage of its enemy's throne room, battered and bleeding and alive. Cole walked back to the Iron Veil. The ship was barely holding together. Half the lights were out. The corridors smelled like smoke and sweat and blood. But the crew was there, and they were alive. And when he stepped onto the bridge, they looked at him the way people look at someone who has pulled them out of a burning building. He sat down in his chair. Through the viewport, the stars were quiet. Nate Greer stood beside him, bruised and exhausted, and asked the question that everyone was thinking. What happens now? Cole was quiet for a long time. He looked out at the stars, at the vast and silent galaxy that had tried so hard to kill his people and failed. "Now we rebuild," he said, "and we make sure no one ever forgets what happens when you come for humanity." The galaxy had written humanity's ending. It had celebrated and moved on and divided the spoils. It had erased the human name from its records and told itself the story was over. But it forgot the oldest rule of war. Never assume your enemy is dead until you have seen the body.